Hello, and you are watching this News 9 Facebook Live with me, Deepak. And today we will be speaking about how and where the COVID-19 vaccine candidates fare so far, and also the status of the Oxford vaccine, which is being developed by the Serum Institute in India. And joining with me today is Mr. Adarsh Vepichedu, my colleague, who will also shed some light on how the vaccines are currently in the clinical trial phases, or what is the status of the vaccine in India. Well, the race is on to develop a vaccine in order to fight and defeat COVID-19. While Russia has rolled out its Sputnik V, many other vaccines are also in phase 3 of clinical trials. And India is currently eyeing the Oxford-AstraZeneca vaccine candidate as the likely first shot against COVID-19 to be available for Indians by the end of 2020, while locally developed candidates are also being watched closely, as it is felt that they may also enter the market with a gap of just a few weeks if it is cleared in the trial phase. And the Oxford candidate is ahead of the two local vaccine candidates that have also entered the human trial stage. So if the vaccine gets a nod, then it would make some sense to use it. While the Serum Institute has started advanced phases of human trials, which is the phase 2 and phase 3 in India, with around 1,600 people aged above 18 years in across 17 selected sites across the country. The two other locally developed COVID-19 vaccine candidates are also in those phases. And my colleague Adarsh will tell you about those two vaccine candidates and what the status about those two vaccine candidates are currently.
Well, Deepak, it is good to be back once again, and probably the first time we're doing something like this. And yes, it is that stage when the entire world is waiting with bated breath for that vaccine. Any kind of news when it comes to a potential vaccine is being appreciated and is being really weighted by not just the world scientific community, but people at large. And when it comes to India also, it reminds us of how on the 15th of August, the Prime Minister himself said that there are 3 vaccine candidates right here in the country that are being developed. And once the scientists give their go-ahead, we will have the vaccines eventually being rolled out. But before these 3 homegrown vaccines are out there in the market, we may have a possibility of the AstraZeneca Oxford University vaccine coming into the picture, given the fact that they're already in advanced clinical trials. We shall in fact get into the details of what these clinical trials are. But again, speaking about the Bharat Biotech's Covaxin, it is being jointly developed with ICMR, and you also have Zydus Cadila's Zycov-D. And both of these vaccines are in early phases of 1 and 2. So that's the initial stages of the clinical trials. Now, when it comes to the Oxford-AstraZeneca vaccine, that is currently being developed by Pune-based Serum Institute of India in collaboration with the British pharma giant, and it is all set to enter the phase 3 clinical trials. Now, an update on that is that on Tuesday, the Union Health Ministry announced that the phase 3 clinical trials would begin right this week on the 22nd of August.
Adarsh, if I could interrupt you here.
Yes, go ahead.
So Adarsh, why is clinical trials important for a vaccine before it is rolled out?
In fact, I'm no expert, but again, as far as I understand, and I really have studied quite a bit when it comes to the clinical trials, what they do and what its importance are. It really brings to mind as to how the Russian vaccine that we were speaking about, they completely skipped the phase 3 clinical trials, and even when it comes to the phase 1 and phase 2 clinical trials, they had very accelerated clinical trials. So the whole purpose of clinical trials is to understand the efficacy, the safety, and also the kind of long-term effects that it may have. So we do not know. Again, the Russian vaccine is only for context. When it comes to the Russian vaccine, we do not know about
what the vaccine is all about and how it would react on humans.
Correct. That's right. And again, if we were to get into a little bit of detail, you had asked about the clinical trials. Now again, first you have the animal trials that will be conducted. These are preclinical tests, and in these animal trials, you essentially check for the immune response. And once a vaccine clears the animal trials stage, the clinical trials essentially begin. And under clinical trials is when you have 3 phases. And clinical trials all about checking for the safety and efficacy of that particular vaccine, as I was just mentioning. So phase 1 involves anywhere between 20 and 80 subjects that will be administered this vaccine. And in this particular phase,
in clinical trials, it involves a lot of human beings, right? The vaccine will be administered on human beings.
Yes. First you have the animal trials. First, you have the animal trials, and after the animal trials are over, yes, you'll have the phase 1, 2, 3 clinical trials with various subjects.
Okay.
And phase 1 is quite small, 20 to 80 subjects, checking for safety, dosage, and immune system stimulation. Phase 2, you'll have a few hundred subjects, and they're all split into age groups. Okay. And you're essentially checking for safety, immunogenicity, proposed doses, schedule of immunizations, and method of delivery. Now, before I toss it over to you, you have the phase 3, the final clinical trials, where thousands of subjects could be involved. And in phase 3, it's very interesting. It's so important, not just because you have several subjects that are involved, but you also have the placebo effect that will be put in, and you essentially check. You have two groups, one that will be administered the placebo, the other that will be administered the vaccine, and you essentially compare the two. And after that, you have the approval stage. Back to you, Deepak.
Also, Adarsh, now this Serum Institute's trial is so far, being considered as the largest for COVID-19 vaccine in the country, because the other two companies have around 1,000 to 1,100 participants enrolled in 5 to 8 sites. But according to sources, the trials would begin across 20 centers, mostly in Pune, Maharashtra, and even Ahmedabad. Along with these 3 sites, these trials would also begin at AIIMS in Delhi, Seth GS Medical College and KEM Hospital in Mumbai, Tamil Nadu Medical College and BYL Nair Hospital in Mumbai, and Postgraduate Institute of Medical Education and Research in Chandigarh. And these are some of the centers that would, conduct the phase 3 trials. So what else do we have on this, Adarsh?
In fact, the most important part that we need to notice here is that we were just mentioning in our introductory remarks that the homegrown vaccines that we're talking about, they could be out in a matter of a few weeks after the Oxford University-AstraZeneca vaccine is out. So yes, when we're talking about the Oxford University-AstraZeneca vaccine, you're talking about 100 million doses that could be generated on a monthly basis. Yeah. And the Serum Institute of India has said that by the end of this year, they could have about 400 million doses of Oxford University-AstraZeneca vaccine that will be ready. Yeah. Now, the point here is 400 million doses of vaccine is clearly not enough, because it's a huge population, and not only that,
our country is populated.
Correct, and you also have the vaccine that needs to be in a sense administered twice. You have 2 doses, so 400 million doses essentially means divided by 2, you could only administer it to 200 million people in the country. And obviously, out of that 200 million, a huge chunk will be the frontline warriors.
Right,
they'll be first.
But there is still a lot of discussion which is going on whether the frontline warriors would get the vaccine first, or whether it would be the very vulnerable crowd. Correct. That will get the vaccine first. So there is a lot of debate that is going on, but in the end, if the vaccine is out, everybody will get it. That's the end line.
That seems to be the aim, and that again should be the resolve of the government also, given that you're only talking about a very little gap between the Oxford University vaccine and the homegrown vaccines. Why not we put in our resources, why not we put in our focus and energy into the homegrown vaccine, so that we're able to launch it almost exactly along with the Oxford University vaccine, so that a larger section of the population is able to get the vaccine.
And also, if we roll out our own homegrown vaccine, Prime Minister Narendra Modi's Atmanirbhar Bharat initiative will also see some sort of a success in terms of the vaccine being developed in our own country, whereas the Oxford-AstraZeneca vaccine which is being developed with the British pharma giant. And if we make some inroads into this particular vaccine, even the British government will be benefited, as well as even our government, because like you said, there will be millions of doses which will be given, but on an average, it wouldn't be enough, because given the population of our country, those 400 million of vaccines wouldn't be enough. So we should also look to develop our own indigenous vaccines, which are also in the clinical trial phase.
Well, yes, indeed, Deepak. Not just Atmanirbhar, you mentioned Atmanirbhar, that's again a very pertinent point right here. But it's not about ensuring that we have enough vaccines to suffice for ourselves. Atmanirbhar Bharat also means, at least that's what Prime Minister Modi says, that we produce so many vaccines and we become so self-reliant that not only do we have enough vaccines for our own country, but we go ahead and export these vaccines also to these other countries, especially those nearby who may not be able to get the vaccine as quickly as a few other countries. So that seems to be the motive. It remains to be seen. It's only a matter of a few more weeks if not months, that we'll get to know as to who's really winning that vaccine race. But at this point in time, given the fact that phase 1 of the clinical trials of Oxford University vaccine is already over in the United Kingdom, so that's out of the way.
Right.
So if a vaccine has to be administered, an abroad vaccine, a vaccine that has been developed elsewhere, if it has to be administered here in India, then you will have to undergo phase 2 and 3 clinical trials, which is what we're currently looking at. But yes, when it comes to the homegrown vaccines, they'll have to go all the way from phase 1, 2, 3, and they're in the initial phases, phase 1 and 2 at this point in time. So that's where the vaccine race really stands. And yes, we shall keep you updated as to how this race really goes on. But while the vaccine race is on, while we're waiting for the vaccine, there are a couple of things that we must keep in mind.
Right, Adarsh. Like, you know, the first phase, or rather the phase 3 trials will feature 100 people who would be vaccinated on the first day, and following that, even the rest of the people, which is like around 1,500 people, will be vaccinated on a phase basis. So the first day we'll see hundreds of people being vaccinated at one particular site. So we have a lot of sites which the Serum Institute has selected, and this COVID shield is likely to be the first candidate which will be made available in India, like you already mentioned. And a written form of consent will also have to be filed, others, by the participants, and they should have to reside in the study area while also complying with the study protocol requirements. So these participants, others, who will be be vaccinated by the Oxford-AstraZeneca, will have to sign a few documents which will obviously tell them that the risk factor is always there, and the risk factor is there, and despite knowing the risk factor, you are presenting yourself to be vaccinated, and that will help AstraZeneca to come out with whether the vaccine will have a positive or a negative effect on the human body. Others.
That's true. It's almost, in fact, almost as if a person is going ahead and volunteering himself to check the safety and efficacy of the vaccines. And yes, when it comes to the protocols, you have a few conditions that the participants will have to follow. For example, if they have any kind of acute illness or if they have some kind of a fever at that time, at the time of vaccine administration, then they may not be allowed for the trials. So when it comes to the Oxford candidate, it has already completed the early phases, again, as we were saying, in the United Kingdom itself, and it has shown quite a bit of promise. So right here also, that is clearly ahead in the race, but we'll have to wait and see whether efforts are on to ensure that our homegrown vaccines overtake the Oxford University vaccine and come out as a winner in that very race, Deepak.
Now, others, speaking about the positive effects that the vaccine witnessed in the phase 1 and phase 2 in Britain, for instance, the preliminary results showed that the vaccine induces an antibody response within 28 days in the similar range to that in individuals who have recovered from COVID-19. And this could, this vaccine could also be called as a second booster dose, which will help the COVID-19 recovered patients increase their antibody response to even higher levels, and even 100% of blood samples given the second dose showed neutralizing activity in the UK. Others.
So that's how it essentially works. Any given vaccine, you need a couple of doses. So first you administer the vaccine, and again, going back to the United Kingdom, when we are talking about the Oxford University AstraZeneca vaccine, when they administered the vaccine to the subjects in the UK, they realized that in the first 28 days or so, there was sufficient antibody response from their immune system. So that's again a positive sign. And after the 28 days, you have a booster dose that is administered, which essentially boosts up the overall working. The overall immune response, the overall working of the vaccine. And those two doses put together is what is ensuring that there's 100% cleanup in the system, essentially, of coronavirus. So that's where the race really stands. And yes, the race is clearly on, and we'll have to wait for a vaccine. But while we do that wait, we have to wait in the right manner, if I were to say that. We'll have to ensure that we'll have to follow all our protocols. If you'd like to add something on that, Deepak.
Also, others, there is a misconception among the people that the vaccine will cure you of COVID-19. Well, that is quite a misconception, because a vaccine which is being developed by many countries will only help you increase your immune response towards COVID-19, and that in turn will help you generate antibodies, which is very important to fight COVID-19, because the COVID-19 recovered patients had clearly showed that the level of antibodies that were in their body after recovering was quite high. So the vaccines also will be looking at the same criteria, because antibodies is what we need to fight against COVID-19. But meanwhile, Adarsh, even as we wait for a vaccine, what do you think the people and we as responsible citizens should do?
Yes, with or without vaccine, again, as you were saying, even if you have the vaccine, as you were rightly pointing out, it is not going to completely eradicate or something of that sort. You'll have to ensure that you're taking all kinds of precautions while we are waiting with bated breath for that all-important announcement for that vaccine to hit the markets. We'll have to ensure that we keep our hands sanitized,
right,
and stick to Namaste. That's the way to go about it, and ensure that we are following all social distancing norms as they are in the place at this point in time. With that, it's a wrap on this brief Newsline Facebook Live session. This is Adarsh Vepachidu signing off.
And this is Deepak Kumar signing off. Until next time, stay safe and take care.